Hey, welcome everybody to Moyna Bass Fishes. Today was the second day of practice at the 2022 MLF Tacklewarehouse Pro Circuit Tournament on Pickwick Lake. Pickwick Lake is a lake that I've been to several times, although I've never been here in mid-April, so this is kind of a new one for me. But anyways, so I'm going to talk about that. But also, I am dedicating this tournament and this week to my dad. So I'm going to share a story. Every day, every video I do this week, I'll be sharing a story of some kind or a little bit of info about my dad. And tonight we're going to talk about my earliest memories of bass fishing with my dad. And it would have been his favorite lake to go to was Sasago Lakes. Now, his favorite lake as far as making a day trip, it'd be Sasago Lake, which is northeast of St. Paul, maybe 35-minute drive, 40-minute drive. And this would have been back in the 70s, early 70s, that he'd take me there. And it's bass fishing was so different then compared to now. I mean, so different. And just what we know now is just, it's what we know now is like this, and what we knew then was like that. So his basically his arsenal for bass fishing was live frogs. So he'd have this frog harness, and we'd buy live frogs, and we'd use live frogs. That'd be one thing we'd do. Then when it came to artificials, it was a red and white Bassarino. So the head would be red, the body would be white, and the Bassarino is a floating plug, wooden plug. You throw it out, and his deal was you throw it out and you just slowly reel it back in. And we never caught a whole lot, okay? Back in those days, we never did catch a whole lot. In fact, I remember I hardly caught anything, and he'd catch a few. So the Bassarino, the other one was the mouse, the wooden mouse. He had a gray mouse, and then he had a black, had kind of a black with like tiger stripe, orangish, yellowish lines on it. And it was the same thing. You cast it out, and then you just slowly reel it back in. And the action on the Bassarino was just like reeling in a stick. It would just kind of come in quartering sideways. And the mouse was almost the same thing. just like reeling in a stick. Or, I don't know, a pine cone. There was not much action to it. So the Bassarino, the mouse, the hula popper. Okay, the hula popper. You actually popped it. It was the first popper that I ever used. And he had a frog-colored hula popper. So that was one. What else did he have? He had some lazy ikes. We never caught anything on those. Although he did catch walleyes on Mille Lacs with the lazy ike. Not when I was with him, but when he was with his buddy. So they'd take the lazy ike and they'd like gob up night crawlers on the hooks and then troll them. Supposedly, that's what he told me anyways. So anyways, back to the bass fishing. What else? I mean, the first times we went, there wasn't even such a thing as a spinnerbait. At least not in his tackle box. What else did he have? He had a original floating Rapala. So we had one of those. I remember the biggest bass I ever had on at that age, in those days, was on that floating Rapala. I remember it hit it, I was twitching it on the surface, it hit it, and I reeled it almost nearly to the boat, and then it got away. It was a nice one, nice fish. It was probably like 3 pounds, but it would have been my biggest bass at the time. So, anyhow, he had that. the bass reno, the mouse, the hula. He had a jitterbug. He had one of those. He didn't use it that much. Neither one of us used it that much. And then he had some old bomber crankbaits, like the ones that look like a bomb. He had some of those, but he never used them that much. Now these are the first. This was the very first stuff that he had. As time went on and things evolved, eventually he got, as soon as the big Cotton Cordell Big O came out, he got some of those right away, and that quickly became one of his favorites. And of course, when the spinnerbaits became available, he got those. He got bunches of those right away. And in fact, the spinnerbait ended up being his favorite lure. A 3/8 or a half ounce black spinnerbait with nickel blades was his go-to spinnerbait, and he caught lots of fish on that thing. He caught walleyes. He caught he's the northern pike king. That's all. Nobody in our back in the Bass Club days, nobody caught more northern pike than my dad did. Always, every tournament, it was pike. He was the pike king. So, but he caught a lot of different. He caught walleyes, and if the conditions are right, I remember him catching a bunch of big walleyes in Forest Lake one time with that spinnerbait in a club tournament, which he won on that spinnerbait that year. Gosh, what else did dogfish, man, he caught dogfish on that spinnerbait. And here's the thing he would do. He would instead of putting like a little Mr. Twister trailer on there, he'd put on like a 6-inch like culprit worm or a power worm, a full long worm on there. And that was kind of what he did. No, I've never seen anybody else do it, but it worked for him. And so anyways, those were the baits of the early years. A lot of fun. Man, when I look back, I hardly caught a thing. I hardly caught anything when I went fishing with them with those baits. But he got me hooked, and I look forward going fishing every time we went. It was a lot of fun. And it's a Sago Lake. Interesting lake. It was flood. It was the water was rising at the time. It was flooding all these trees and everything, and it was kind of neat. But all right, let's get to Pickwick, okay? Day 2 at Pickwick. Again, I saw. Probably had, I don't know. I shook off most of my fish today, so I don't know what size they were. Probably. Man, I must have had about 15 bites today. I did hook one smallmouth that was a little over 3 pounds. That was the biggest fish I put in the boat today. But had a fair number of bites. Just don't know what size they were. So and I didn't really have to shake them off, because what I did is I cut the hook off. So with the hooks cut off, then you get the bite and you just don't know what size they are. You kind of, the really tiny fish, you can tell that, hey, those are tiny ones. But when I'm shaking off a fish, it could be a 2-pounder, it could be a 6-pounder. I don't really, you really can't tell, because you can't, as soon as you start pulling, putting any pressure on them, they let go of the bait. So a 2-pounder can hold that pressure the same as a 6-pounder, because you never really get to fully lean into a fish, so you don't really know how big they are. But I wanted to make sure I didn't hook my fish, because it is a spawning season, and if I happen to be thrown into a bed, I don't want to be catching that fish. I want to just get the bite, know he's there, and then pull the bait away from him. So did a lot of that today. Although this morning I was on a moving bait pattern, and they were biting really good this morning. I probably had a limit in like the first 40 minutes fishing moving baits, but then that bite died. And that's something I see a lot this time of year is when you're at the beginning of the spawn or at the spawn, a lot of times that moving bait bite will work in the morning, and then I don't know, once that sun gets up and the water temperature climbs, the fish just kind of shut off on the moving baits, and then you have to just, then you got to fish really slow with jig, slow moving jigs or shaky heads or whatever. So that's kind of what I saw today, and it's probably what's going to happen in the tournament. Might have a flurry of bites right away, and then just have to grind out the rest of them fishing slow. So that's I guess that's all I got to say about Pickwick. Tomorrow's our off day, and then the tournament starts on Thursday. So our practice is done. 2 days of practice is all they give us for these tournaments, which makes it challenging. It makes it really challenging because you got to be on top of your game, and you gotta usually what happened with 2 days of practice, what usually ends up happening for me is a lot of times I end up having to search new water in the tournament, because once I play out what I learned in the first 2 days, a lot of times I gotta just expand and go forward with some new water. Maybe take the patterns I have, but just go to some new water. But anyways, that's all I got for you tonight. Over.